Yeah.
So if I were in Las Vegas, I think I'd be feeling a lot of self-pity. Like, what am I doing? I should be in Israel, but I'm here, and it means so much to be with all of you and to see some new faces. Gosh, I'm just looking at that wall. I'm thinking of Shoshana's Holocaust Memorial. I'm thinking about, I think it's a gift from Brenda and Howard Goffin of this picture and what it means. And I'm even thinking about what looks like a cute picture, absolute L'chaim, but it was given to us by the family of Gershon Bird, who many of you might know, who was one of the most righteous people we ever met, who died at the age of 40, who was from Deerfield. And his parents would give to us his picture. So just looking at that wall, I'm just like, there's so much meaning. And our conscious minds don't always see how much is going on behind the scenes. We pick up what we can pick up and we're here, but we don't always see like the immensity of where we are in history and where okay, so what I want to do, it said Ali talks about Aliyah, but I mean, the truth is I've been eating nonstop and I drink like 7 cups of coffee a day. I go to the theater, I got symphony tickets. I love, I could talk about it, but that's not what I'm not going to really talk about it, although I'm going to make sure to leave like 10 minutes at the end. I am not an expert in Israeli history or anything. I'm just going to share from my heart what it looks like to me. But again, I have to preface by saying an expert in Israel, I am not. But happy and willing and honored to share my experience, I am. And Rabbi Gadi touched on it, and Eve spoke about it last week, but it should be repeated. This time in the modern Jewish calendar begins, so Shoshana's painting this is kind of strange and amazing HP, hashgacha, like hashgacha pratit, some of you know that term, like everything coming together to send us a message. But we begin this time of the Jewish calendar with Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it's marked in Israel by endless, I mean, it's like you couldn't, there like aren't enough tears, I mean, there's not enough tears to describe what it's like there and the experience that I know some of you here know all too intimately. But I just want to point to the moment that the siren, that siren goes off for 2 minutes. Yom HaShoah, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, I think it's 2 minutes. And then I think Memorial Day is 1 minute, where the whole country stops. Even if you're on the highway, you stop the car and you get out, and everybody just collectively mourns for an experience that there are no words to describe the agony and the tragedy that, again, just can't be put into words. And then 1 week later, which is today, last night, because most of you know this, but for anyone coming in new, a Jewish day starts when the sun goes down, so it starts at night. So last night began Yom Hazikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, where we memorialize every single soldier who lost his or her life fighting for the state of Israel. And we also mourn all of those who have been killed in terror incidents. So it's a very heavy day, and particularly heavy, bless you, because there isn't, I think you've said this last week, but again, like you got to repeat it. There isn't an Israeli who isn't affected somehow. If it wasn't in your family, it was your best friend's family. It was your cousin's wife. It's just all too intimate. And it's such a palpable and collective grief. And I want to reiterate collective, because that word that it transcends politics, it transcends divisiveness. And you know, the grief culminated in the loss through a senseless, horrific act of terror of this unbelievable family, one mother and two daughters. You probably heard of the D family. If you got to just go on your phone if you haven't seen them, because you can literally, if you look at these people, it like looks like light is emanating from them. They're so, these two girls, 115, 120, and their mom, Lucy, are so light filled. I can't really describe it any other way. But I'm bringing them up because that was not the last one, unfortunately, but next to the last act of terror where these lives were senselessly taken. And I'm bringing it up because of the contrast that Rabbi Gadi spoke about, that there's like this familial mourning, because it really is familial in Israel. Everybody's connected. It's not something removed from you. So there's like this deep, and we all know this, when it's not in our experience, our brain categorizes it and doesn't allow ourselves to experience a lot of pain around other people's tragedies, because it's a protective device or mechanism of the brain, because we'd go crazy if we felt everybody's tragedy. So we sort of just, we hear about all these things, it's so sad, but in Israel, it's your family. So it's this incredible grief. And then what happens in Israel is there's something called a tekes ma'avar. So a tekes is a ceremony, and ma'avar means transition. So when the sun goes down, they have everyone, they have a transition ceremony where they literally transition their minds, hearts, bodies, souls from grief to this crazy celebration of Yom Ha'atzmaut, of Independence Day, celebrating the 75th year of Israeli independence, of self-determination, of Jewish sovereignty after 2,000 years, of being at the whims and whimsical, cruel nature of any force that wanted to destroy us. We are finally sovereigns of our own nation with self-determination and a thriving democratic state. It's so absolutely remarkable, but it's not easy to go from like broken to like this crazy partying. It's like it's 1999, right? It's like so crazy there. I'm like way too much of a librarian. I'm like, this is too much for me. I get nervous because it's like outrageous amounts of partying and all kinds of partying. You have like young, crazy partying, like New Year's Eve type partying. And then you have like deeper partying, but everybody's partying. It's like, it's an unbelievable ma'avar. It's an unbelievable transition. And I think that there's actually there's a word that I heard somebody say this, and it made so much sense to me. We know that when we go to a cemetery and we go, and what do we put down on the stone? What? Yeah, we put a stone on stone. We put an even. We put a rock on stone, and the word even, which represents how we grieve. And there's interesting origins of that, which I don't really get, but yeah, we put the rock, the even, on the tombstone to grieve. But the word even comes from the same root of leave note, to build. So what that really means, and this is so Jewish and it's so Israeli, is instead we feel total grief. We allow, even we talked about this when I was here, I'm sure Eve has too, the laws of Shiva like mirror this so much. You're supposed to grieve like unconditionally, not look at the bright side, not like say, oh, I really should get in control. You're supposed to totally grieve, but ultimately you use your grief, your even, to build. You literally get on the shoulders of those who have perished, of those who were killed, of those who lost their lives defending the state, to terrorism in the Holocaust. You use the stone to build on their legacy and to make the world better and bigger and greater and kinder. The concept that to build comes from stone, and even more so, the word for independence is atzmaut. It also comes from the word etzem, which means bone. So even our very independence, our self-determination, our right to exist free of persecution, being in command of our very own existence and destiny is predicated on bones. It's standing on the bones of those who came before us. So it's just it's all over Judaism, and you've heard this so many times. Like, even I know I said it. I know I'm sure even Gadi, I know Rabbi David said it. But even the word for why, lama, you've heard this before. But lama is, why is this happening? Why? Like, why would this happen? But that very same word can be shifted if you change the vowelization to lama. For what purpose has this happened? So it is quintessentially Jewish to feel pain and then to kind of internally experience a tekes ma'avar and an internal ceremony of transition, and say, for what reason was this lost life? For what legacy am I built? I mean, here we have like amazing women who are building from the legacy of their parents. For what? Like, what? Why am I here? And how can I build on their etzem, on the bones themselves? And just looking at Shoshana's picture and then what's next to it, it's just so Jewish. I mean, it's like crazy. And then I think of Gershon Bird just residing as an angel, overseeing all of
I look behind you.
and right, and Bruce Finn, all of Shalom. So who, I'm sure this is all because of it. So I do want to say that I think that a lot of Israel is painted very mythologically for people outside of Israel. Either you're like planting trees, which, by the way, I have so much appreciation for the JNF. When we walk in our forests, I want to call, like, you know, who's the lady who's responsible for the JNF?
It was a lady.
I'm sure it was a lady. But we talk about, we sort of have these mythological, or we get into the Arab-Palestinian, the Palestinian-Jewish conflict, Israeli conflict, but they're again, that's like selective attention. There's so much more to say. But I will say that Israel's going through a very, very, very hard time now. Not that Israel doesn't go through hard times all the time. They do. The very name for Israel comes from the word to struggle with God in the case of the word of Israel. But Israel is always in a state of some sort of existential struggle, and they are right now. They definitely are. Without getting at all political, God forbid we wouldn't waste this time. Adrian's laughing because we were having a good laugh about that yesterday. But God forbid we would waste it. But if they're saying that what's happened with judicial reform is that like, to a certain degree, not the same, but similar somewhat to America, is that it's deeply polarized. And that deep polarization has been devastating to Israel. And when Israel is weakened through polarization, there are ramifications. Our economic standing has been hurt. Our international standing has been hurt. And when when we're weaker in that regard, our external enemies, think Iran, they are very aware of where we stand with our internal weakness. And most of all, we've experienced abominable terror in the last month. So it's not a rosy period. It's not a rosy period, but I'll say that I truly believe, especially when you live with Amunah, especially when you have a sense of a divinely directed, purposeful history at the basis of your consciousness, which I think here in L'Chaim Center we talk about a lot. Amidst the devastation, there is like a long-range perspective that allows you to think, where are we heading? And it's easy for me to say, but I'll quote Leo D. So Leo D, Rabbi Leo D, is the husband of Lucy. who was just killed senselessly by terror. He lost two of his, you have to look at the picture. When I say beautiful, I mean really beautiful, like light streaming from their curls. I mean, there's no words to describe it. I mean, unbelievable. And he gets up from Shiva and he's on a mission to build. He gets up from his rock. He gets up from his bone and he's like on a mission to build. He begs the politicians, don't politicize Yom Ha'atzmaut. Don't what's the word? Protest. Don't protest on Yom Hazikaron. Don't bring ugliness of polarization to a day that can universally be celebrated and commemorated for a 2-day period. Don't destroy it. He begged the nation, left, right, it doesn't matter. Begged the nation to transcend their political divisions and like bask in the miracle of the state of Israel, the absolute miracle. So I want to share very short because I really do want to leave time for thoughts. I just want to share as we move through, we're going to move through Yom Hazikaron and maybe internally have a tekes ma'avar and allow ourselves to transition to 75 years of Israeli independence, which is just so unbelievable. And I'm just going to bring three incredible things about Israel. And I'm not going to talk about the startups and I'm not going to talk about the, like, there's just all the kindness, all the social support, all the innovation. There's so much to talk about, but we're not going to go there. I'm just going to talk about three broad scale miracles of standing here today, 75 years later, having the state of Israel. And I'm going to use the prefix re, R-E, before each of the words, because it's very important to understand that everything in Israel is a re-X, meaning I'm going to talk about resettling the land of Israel. I'm going to talk about revitalizing the land of Israel really short. I'm going to talk about reshifting the Jewish population to the land of Israel. And the reason I use I don't say settling, and I don't say vitalizing, that's a word, and I don't say shifting, is because we were there. And that is so very important to understand that Israel is the Jewish person's indigenous soil. Just like vegetation grows best in its indigenous soil, the Jew is indigenous to Israel. When I say indigenous, what I mean is from the time of Joshua, after the giving of the Torah, 40 years in the desert, after the death of Moses, Joshua leads the Jewish nation into the land of Israel. And the Jewish nation, with one exile in between, with one temporary exile in between, exists in Israel, in the land of Israel for over a millennium, for over 1,000 years, until after the destruction of the Second Temple, culminating in the Bar Kokhba revolt, 135, 137. So we say CE, Common Era, or here they've used the term AD, but we say BCE, before the Common Era, and CE, Common Era. So we have over 1,000 years where Jews lived in their indigenous soil. And that is really so important to understand, because everything that we are experiencing that's so otherworldly, even though it's all masked in nature and normalcy, it's so incredibly unusual. It's so unprecedented historically, but it's all about returning in a new, innovative way, but reestablishing what did exist for 1 millennium. And then, of course, after the destruction of the Second Temple, culminating in Masada and the Bar Kokhba revolt, Jews are permanently exiled from the land of Israel. And there always are a trickle of Jews who live in the land of Israel, but we know that for 2,000 years, we have been at the mercy of our hosts, whoever they are. as Shoshana is currently painting on the door. So the first miracle is the resettlement of the land of Israel. And again, I'm going to give a few minutes to each one. But just looking at that makes me think, everybody knows that at Auschwitz, and I think several other concentration camps too, Doris, you can, is Elaine here, someone can verify, but of course we have the Arbat Macht Frei. Did I say that right? Arbat Macht Frei, did I say that right? That the entrance to Auschwitz, the work will set you free, which was of course the most twisted way of teasing the Jewish person to believe that if they worked hard, they could somehow free themselves, which of course was the greatest lie ever told. But what was very amazing about the initial settlement of the land of Israel was that work really did set the original settlers of the land of Israel free, meaning there was an absolute commitment to working the land, not taking a victim stance, never seeing themselves victim, and not allowing anybody to determine on the outside to determine their destiny. And that was the beginning of not the Jews always lived in the land of Israel, but the return in the late 1800s, let's say 1850 to the late 1800s, before the state of Israel, unbelievably hard work and unwillingness to be a victim and commitment to having nobody be over them, even though ultimately the Jews were reliant on the UN and governmental bodies to determine the land of Israel. Jews were not going to take no for an answer, and they started to work the land, many of them secular. Secular Jews generally did not come to Israel or Palestine at that time until nationalism and anti-Semitism got so bad in the late 19th century that they started coming. But what's so amazing about Israel is that it really was founded by to a large degree, secular pioneers who didn't wait for a miracle. No splitting of the sea. They didn't wait for the Purim story. They didn't wait for a miracle to come in and give everything they had to work the land. And the reason I say this, because we're Orthodox, this is an organization that comes from a more spiritual perspective, but the gratitude for the secular pioneers for working that land and never taking no for an answer, and never ever after, especially as they were working the land and strengthening Palestine and British mandate Palestine at that time, boom, the Holocaust happens. They could have easily just taken the eternal refugee status, and they didn't. They wanted to be self-determined and build their land, and that's exactly what they did. And that's really and part of Yom Ha'atzmaut is incredible gratitude to those early pioneers that built that land. That Mark Twain, who wrote in 1850 a quote that's really worth reading. You could Google it. He's in a horse and buggy in the land of Palestine. He says, "This place was forgotten by God. It's a wasteland. It's disgusting. And it was forgotten by God. I don't see a tree. I don't see a person except for the occasional Bedouin traveler. This place was cast away, essentially a God's castaway. It's cursed by the deity." This is what Mark Twain wrote in 1850. And this absolute, this tikva, this hope, this willingness to work very, very hard, and this unwillingness to be subject to any foreign entity are incredible Israeli qualities, culminating in what we have today, which is just, on an unprecedented scale in terms of, I'll just give one example. You remember the water crisis of Israel. You turn the shower on, you turn it off, you make your coffee, you turn it off. You would never leave your shower on to get hot. Everything was conserved, right? Now, you still are careful with water, but you don't really have to be. Why? They desalinated the Mediterranean Sea. The innovations of Israel are literally, they desalinated the sea. California is meeting with Israel all the time to try to figure out how the heck to do this with the Pacific Ocean. The miracles of innovation and creativity, and always making the world a better place for people who had injuries, for people who are blind. I took my stepfather, my mother and stepfather came to Israel not so long ago. My stepfather's blind. I took him to OrCam, which is this unbelievable Israeli innovation that helps the blind. It takes a picture of anything, like let's say I'm looking at Stacy. It'll make a picture of Stacy. It'll say Stacy, and then next time Stacy's walking past me a year later, I'll know it's Stacy. I was the guy's like, why are you crying? I'm just doing a tour. The guy who gave us the tour was this. Here's another point. Was this wonderful Arab sales rep? Amazing guy, Arab Israeli sales rep at OrCam. So trying to figure out why I'm crying, but unbelievable. So miracle number one is the miracle of the resettlement of the land of Israel. Miracle number two, and there's 100 miracles, I'm just sharing 3 of them, is revitalizing the Hebrew language. This is not a normal story. Yet, like, who speaks Latin here? Who can go to Starbucks and order a coffee in Latin? Latte skim milk 2%. Make sure you're right. No, not 2%. God forbid. Like latte, right? Right. I need this decaf. Right? Who can do that in Latin? So, what in the world happened? Latin is a dead language. Hebrew was a sleeping beauty. So it wasn't dead because Jews throughout the diaspora for 2,000 years after they were kicked out or exiled from their indigenous soil, they then were everywhere. They were in Africa, they were in Europe, they were in Australia, they were in Spain, they were in Germany, they were North, South Africa, wherever they were. They prayed and they learned, and Torah's Aramaic, Talmud's Aramaic, but that's a different discussion. They always prayed in Hebrew. They always were prayed for a return to Zion 3 times a day in Hebrew. So Hebrew was a liturgical language. It was the language of the Torah and it was the language of prayer. So it wasn't dead, but it was like kind of like Shakespeare. But even, it was a religious language from the Torah and from prayer. So let's say you're a merchant from Tunisia and you meet another merchant from Spain. So you have no common, well, actually you might both speak Ladino, but let's say you didn't, right? And then, so what would you speak if you had no common language? You'd speak this biblical Hebrew. Yeah, I didn't know you were here. So Elaine, so you have they always sit together, right? So you can ask them about what we were talking about. So they would speak Hebrew, but so Hebrew was language that like people would eke out, like if they didn't have a common language, but they would say like, "Where far out thou, merchant?" Like it was a Torah prayer language. When anti-Semitism starts growing, when nationalism starts growing, this wacky, crazy, eccentric, funky, bizarre lexicographer, which is a dictionary editor named Eliezer Ben Yehuda, says, yeah, you just read it, says, okay, if we're going to return, because he was part of the Zionist fervor at that time, if we're going to return to the land of Israel, we've got to have a common language. You can't build, I guess they do it in Switzerland, they have like 4 languages, but like there's no such thing as everybody's, a common language will build a common sense of identity, will build a common destiny. There is no way that we can have Russian and Ladino and Yiddish and German and God knows what, some sort of, and all the Sephardi, language. There's no way that everybody can come in and no one can speak to each other. It'll be a Tower of Babel. It will make, it'll be destructive. So he says, talk about making the impossible possible. I'm going to make the biblical language, God-given to Torah language, a modern language. Like, give me a latte and what's going on with artificial intelligence. Like, that's like a modern, of course, not at that day. So he starts to take all the words from the Torah. Shoter. Shoter means like a government official. And he creates the word mishtara, which means police force, from the word shoter. So that's just one random example. By the way, when you make aliyah, you say the most embarrassing things. They have this in my bakery in Mass, they have this delicious banana bread. So I say, I only want one slice. So I say, ani rak rotza prutza achat, which means I only want one prostitute.
Oh, gosh.
Slice of prutza is prostitute. I said, could I have a coffee and I only want one prostitute? The cute thing is they love it. They're not like, you loser. They're like, it's so amazing you came here. I'm a one prostitute type. I only want one prostitute. Yeah, now when I see him, he's like, you only want one prostitute. Anyway, so he takes the biblical words. He adds words like bakut, which means bottle. It's like because when you pour water, it goes like crazy things he does. He creates his own grammatical structure, and he modernizes the Hebrew language. Not just him. There were other individuals, and then the Hebrew Academy of Language. And I mean, it's not just him, but he was the crazy person who basically gave birth to this idea. And Ben Gurion subsequently basically outlaws the speaking of Yiddish. No Yiddish theater, no Ladino, but that's much later because Ben Yehuda's in the 1850s. Ben Yehuda does something really bad for parent-child relationship. He traumatizes his son Ben Zion and insists that Ben Zion is born. When Ben Zion is born, he only speaks Hebrew to him. So Ben Zion Ben Yehuda is the first modern Jew to have Hebrew as his mother tongue. Suffice to say, he was traumatized because none of his peers this one spoke Ladino, and this is in the 1880s. This one spoke Russian. This clique spoke German, and here he spoke Hebrew, so he suffered a lot. But Ben Yehuda understood that it starts with children. It's got to start with children. And so he is able to take this sleeping beauty, like this religious language that is essentially lying in a latent sort of way, and he births it into a modern language. And every day when the newspaper Hasfi, or every week, I don't know, comes out, it comes out with lists. Here are new words for you to learn. And everyone's learning I don't know, like to be annoyed. From the word anger in Hebrew, mild anger. God's mildly angry. So being annoyed is like being mildly angry. So mild anger. And he's inventing, and not just him, now a whole academy, and they create this language. And there's always words that are I just learned the word to stroll. It's hard because it's 4. Most roots have 3 letters. This one has 4, and that's when my tongue gets I'm too old. I'm like, I can't, like maybe Yosef will get it, but to stroll down Dizengoff Street. So Dizengoff is Dizengoff. So there's a word, lahiz da gef. Like, so lahiz is reflexive, and then you take the word, the letters for Dizengoff, the main letters. So it's to stroll down Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv. That's from the 70s. But the point is that it's just being constantly innovated, and it is now it is never before in the history of humanity has a language been taken and revitalized to become a living modern tongue. So unbelievable. And the last thing I want to say, so that's revitalizing. So we're resettling, because once we were settled and we were indigenous and we created a civilization, and we are resettling the land to its thriving, incredible Israel that we have today. We revitalized the language because it was always vital and vibrant, because it's the language of our Torah, but we revitalized it to be a modern tongue. And the last that is incredible is re-shifting the population of the Jewish world to the land of Israel. in 1948, I want to say, I might be wrong, but I want to say like 0.03, I think. I might be wrong about that, but something really little of the Jewish world lives in the land of Israel. So in 1948, on May 14th, when independence is established, 0.03% of the Jewish world lives in Israel. Today, 51% of the Jewish world lives in Israel. We have crossed over to be the majority of Jews now live in the land of Israel. So what the heck happened? So you guys know that you have learned that this one, I don't know how you can't see God's hand in this one, because all throughout the Torah, we hear over and over again that the Lord will gather us in from the four corners of the earth. Ufaratsta yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba. That means you will be spread out north, south, east, and west, and God will gather us in back to the land that he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And even little old me, like who's like learning, who says like I'd like one prostitute, sees with her own eyes. I'm sitting in my Ulpan, my Hebrew instruction class. One day, like 10 more Russian Jews come in. Why? Well, actually, after communism, believe it or not, Jewish life was thriving in Moscow, thriving in St. Petersburg, thriving in Ukraine. Chabad was rocking it. A lot of Jews left after communism, but a lot of Jews stayed. They had their businesses, they had their money. They also had family. They couldn't leave, they didn't want to leave. Boom, something happens, war, or in the case of Moscow, Putin's mandatory draft, where people are literally afraid they're going to be, their sons and husbands and themselves are going to be drafted into this evil war. All of a sudden you see I'm looking at it from obviously from a religious perspective, but you see the Lord gathering. It's almost like a room, like, okay, the Iron Curtain's going to fall. You can leave. Some of you will stay. So I'm just gonna take my magic broom and I'm just gonna sweep you out of Ukraine and Russia into the land of Israel. And this last year we had 40,000 Ukrainian and Russian Olim, people coming in to immigrate to the land of Israel.
Just say it again. When was it 0.3?
At the founding of the state. I think it was 0.0. I might be wrong. I don't know, let's say 0.3. Meaning to say it was less than 1%. Who lived there? It was who came. There was a smattering of ultra religious Jews that lived there in poverty, and then you had the secular pioneers from Russia, and they came, and it wasn't until late 40s, early 50s that all the Sephardi Jews started coming from Iraq, Iran, Morocco, Syria, Libya, Tunisia. They started coming early 50s. So at the very beginning, and then it was after the wars, a smattering of Holocaust survivors, which is, by the way, the smattering of Holocaust survivors. I was talking to Lindsay, we were having coffee. That is the reason this whole, I don't want to get political, the whole thing, why don't the religious fight in the army, which is a very, very difficult issue. It was based in the fact that who was religious in 1948? A ragtag little group of Holocaust survivors. So Ben Gurion looks at this group of 400, 700 people who lost everything, and says, you know what, for you and your children, exempt. And because Ben Gurion genuinely believed that, like a dinosaur, the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox world would become extinct. I don't think he had his eye on the story of the Egyptian, 6 children at a time, the story of Egypt. I mean, that's a different discussion, but little did he know that the very opposite was going to happen. The ultra-Orthodox are now 13% of the Israeli population and growing. But at that time, he said to this tiny group of Holocaust survivors and for Haredi ultra-Orthodox people in the land of Israel, who he really believed would not make it with the emergence of the new Israeli and the Chalutzim, the pioneers, the new Israeli, the soul. He said, for you exempt, and for your children exempt. And then now we have that law instituted the yeshiva exemption, it's called. It's not for today, but it's just interesting.
Is it in the Constitution?
There is no constitution, and that's why we're in so much trouble today.
Oh.
There's no constitution in Israel. That's why this judicial reform is such a nightmare, because we don't have a constitution. The reason for that is really interesting too. There was no time. I mean, they were fighting for their very existence. At the moment that they declared a state, all the Arab nations were descending upon them, trying to obliterate their very right to exist. There was no time to, even the Declaration of Independence, they kind of did ChatGPT with ours. They sort of were just what's his name? Birham or something. I can't remember his name. He was in charge of writing the Declaration of Independence. He took Jefferson, he took the words, he mutated them. They fought about whether to put God in or out. They threw it in, it was so quick. They were under so much pressure. We don't have a constitution, which is why the issue of how much power the Supreme Court has, does it have disproportionate power? Does it not? It would have been easier to determine if there had been a separation of powers that we don't have because there isn't a constitution. So the three re's that are miraculous, and there are so many more, but it's the resettlement to what we have today. It is the revitalization of the Hebrew language, and it's the reshifting of the Jewish world back to its natural habitat, back to its ancestral promise, back to its past, its present, and back to its future, literally. It's like back to the future. I can't explain it. It's this combination of what was and this incredible eye to the future of what could be. And I'll just end with that a lot of people, there's two people who at the 75th anniversary really made a big impact on me. One was Leo D, who is the husband of Lucy and the two girls who who were ruthlessly killed. And then the other is Yishai Fleischer, who is a real advocate for resettlement of Hebron. He's a very interesting and amazing person. So, and they both say something really amazing. They say, we're standing here at 75 years. We've come so far. It's beyond the human ability to comprehend how magnificent, how transcendent, how incredible Israel is, even with its complexities and even with its struggles and even with the mistakes of not having a constitution that are now leading to all this divisiveness. They said we have the tech, we have the high tech, we have the democracy, albeit somewhat fragile right now. It's going to remain a democracy, but we have the thriving everything. Now it's time to grow up. Now it's time, if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when you're in survival mode, you're in survival mode. But when your more essential needs are met, it's time to think more existentially about what it means to be go deeper and be wiser. When you're looking for food, you're looking for food. But because Israel's needs are essentially met, it's time to Leo D says it's time to grow up. And growing up, Jewish style, means to unify. Means you can disagree with people. You can disagree vehemently with people, but you love them and they're your brothers and sisters. And what you believe, what you think has nothing to do with your essential essence, which is connected to me, which is connected to you. Leo D says, you use this time to unify, to transcend what disunifies us. And we have, again, it's reunifying, which is hard in America because it would be hard to imagine America coming together in unity given what's going on today. But in Israel, we are a collective whole. We are one organism, all attached. If it's the overused cliche is you know, if you cut your finger, right? This is the Talmud actually gives this example. If you cut your finger with a knife, you don't cut your other hand in retribution because you are one. We are one. Yishai Fleischer says, and you know, we were laughing with Nani and Papa. I always say, and I'll end with this, but I really am going to end with this. That he says, look, there's a lot of like paradigmatic relationships in the Torah that Adrian and I were talking about this, that show us how Israel, what could happen if we're disunified. There is the tribe of Israel and the tribe of Judah. There is King David and King Saul. They're all like sort of tragic endings. But there's one relationship in the Torah that is a guide for how we're supposed to grow up, spiritually grow up and be one nation, one heart. Because when we're one heart, the whole world feels it. Iran, you think this has nothing to do with Iran? Iran feels it. When we be like one people, they know it. We're stronger economically, internationally, politically, spiritually. We're stronger. So Yishai Fleischer says there's one relationship. It's the relationship between two of Jacob's sons, Yisachar and Zevulun. So Yisachar and Zevulun, to simplify, Yisachar was the Torah scholar, and Zevulun was the businessman or the builder or the innovator. And Yisachar supported Zevulun's efforts, and Zevulun celebrated and supported Yisachar's efforts, meaning to say that Torah study and reverence to the Torah that is truly the heartbeat of the Jewish people keeps the Jewish people alive, unified with integrity. But that world needs to respect the more secular world that is committed to an Israel of democracy, of innovation, of creativity. And the Jewish world, the Jewish more secular world has to also recognize that there is a Torah that unifies the nation. There has to be a mutual, not just like teeth gritting respect, but like bleeding out of your pores, out of your heart, respect for the whole nation and what everybody brings to the table. And that is all, when we get to that, Rabbi D says, that's the messianic era. That's bringing in the messianic era. We've resettled the land. We've revitalized the language. We're resettling the Jewish population. We're returning with vibrancy to the land of Israel. Now it's time to grow up and love each other unequivocally. And even though protests are a great sign of democracy, like Dayenu, it's time to work this out. I'm a big fan of President Herzog, who's trying very much to unify the nation and to create a compromise around judicial reform so that we can live together and respect deeply with love what everybody brings to the table. And according to Leo D, and in my humble opinion, I'll have one prostitute and a nation that's fulfilling all the prophecy and culminating the cherry on top, which is unity and universal respect and love for each other, no matter what we believe. So that's all, folks. Right. Oh, right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before you end,
Yeah.
I can't read this because it's too emotional, but will you just read this from Hillel? So this is Allie's son.
Maybe someone else wants to read it. Maybe you read it. Yeah, you read it.
It's from Allie's son,
Talk
from
from
Talia's husband today.
This is Hillel. I had a very different experience today in going to my friend's grave who was killed 2 years ago. When I used to go on Yom Hazikaron ceremonies, as someone who didn't know anyone personally, it was sad, but also an experience. An inspiring and sad one where you understood and appreciated how we got the land we have today. Now, as someone who knows someone, it's not an experience. It just plain sucks. What is there to experience? I think it's amazing, though, that the day is super diverse and the different effects it can have on people. And that's something we have to take to heart as a nation, that we are and might feel different, yet are one.
Yes. Do you feel safe walking around, going places? So I'm gonna answer that yes and no. By the way, this is over, guys, but if you wanna stay, it's great. So I'm gonna say yes and no. Yeah, so there's two reasons for the yes and one reason for the no. No, two reasons for the no. You never feel like you're gonna be mugged or your car, well, something like that. But I'll start negatively. The psychological nature of terrorism, the whole raison d'etre of terrorism is to always leave you with ambiguity of, it's not like there are neighborhoods I'd want to avoid. Like the whole thing is to wreak havoc with the psychology of like, you know, where will it be next? So that is the psychological nature of terror, and I don't dismiss it. I think everyone lives with it, and you'd be lying if you said, you know, I feel totally safe, you know, but I feel, but still, I can't explain that. I feel so safe. I also feel so safe because I know that if God forbid anything were to happen, every single person would rush to help. Like there is no, you know, like you feel very safe around Israelis and the like cool guys, you know, whatever. But so I have this overwhelming feeling of safety, like the streets feel exceptionally safe. But I'm not going to deny that the psychological nature of terror is to mess with your mind and be like, mess up with your mind. You know,
That's what I have a granddaughter that lives in Rochelle.
yeah,
Married with 3 little girls. And she's a very creative writer, and that's what she writes.
yeah.
She said, yes, I do feel safe, but the political worries or the risk, they live in Rochelle, gives me also feel like you, but in a hall, she feels safe or what.
Yeah, like you feel so safe.
Yeah, the same.
But yeah. Exactly. Anyone else thanks for coming, Lindsay. Anyone else want to share anything? Yeah, hi, nice to see you. Yes, I did.
I was so wonderful to meet you in person.
You're gonna do a dance show?
She did.
Curious, the main reason why you decided, I never really heard the main reason why you decided to move to Israel, and are you settled in now?
So, I mean, it was, anyone who wants to leave. We always knew ultimately we wanted to, more my husband, but you know, we always knew we wanted to go because of our sense of Jewish history and the meaning of the land of Israel. But we didn't intend to do it so fast. I would say that we've had, there's two kinds of olim. Olim comes from the word aliyah, which is, you know, in Hebrew, you don't say immigrant or moving. You don't say I'm moving to Israel or you're a new immigrant. You say olim, which means going up, or, you know, new people who are going up, olim hadashim, right? So there's two kinds of olim. Some people make aliyah because they're forced out of their host countries from persecution. Think, I mean, not even crazy persecution. Think France. Ask a French Jew why they made aliyah, and they'll say, you know what? I remember the Holocaust wasn't so long ago, and I don't feel comfortable in Paris anymore. I can't wear my yarmulke. I don't feel it. So are the French leaving out of persecution? No, but a sense of impending doom. And then there are people who come to Israel for ideological reasons, and that was us. We didn't have any reason. So we're very blessed because we have the ability to have a home. We've moved to a beautiful neighborhood. We moved with our best friends. So I would say that our klita means absorption. So our absorption has been very non-traumatic. I think the hardest part of our absorption is we only went with one son, at the time he was 12. And I think honestly, with his ADHD, he hears Hebrew like the peanuts, the peanuts where she goes, "Rah, rah, rah." I think he sits in school all day and he hears, like the thing is, like, I think that at that age, if you have a more linear mind, you can like hear the words and your brain, the younger you are, the more your brain acclimates. But it was so hard for him, it is hard for him to hear it. He's doing great, but it's not easy. And acclimating he had to acclimate to Israeli culture. We live in our Anglo bubble. I say Anglo, it's not just American, it's British, it's Australian, it's South African, whatever. But it's English speaking. He has a few Anglo friends, but otherwise it's the kids, like they go so fast, you can't even. So seeing his acclimation was the hardest thing. But for us, we're with other Anglos, and it's been pretty amazing, given how hard it can be. Hi, Julie. Anyone else have any thoughts or anything?
I just wanted to say one thing about Yom Hazikaron. We were once in Israel at this time, and we went to Mount Herzl Cemetery where the war dead are buried. And there were two things that were absolutely amazing. It was so personal. There were so many people there. They're all bringing flowers and stones and whatever. And a lot of them, it's cathartic for them to tell you their story. So if you're standing next to someone who's mourning, then they, you say, "I'm so sorry," and they launch into the life and death of this loved one. So it's very, very, very personal. The second thing I want to say is, and Ellie alluded to it, but in terms of Jewish unity, the Torah, but it's not in the 5 books of Moses, I think it's Talmud, says that we're all one big neshama. The Jewish soul is one big soul. And when a child is born, a Jewish child is born, a piece of that soul gets inserted into that child. So on a spiritual level, it's like we're going against our nature when we're not unified.
Yep.
And it's critical. That's the most critical thing now for Jews all over the world, is just to get along with each other.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, we will have fulfilled God's promise.
That's really what that's exactly what Leo said. That's the fulfillment. And it's in our hands. Yeah. Yeah.
I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago. And the one thing, I haven't been there in 5 years. And when I drove along some of the old highways that I used to cross, I noticed there were simply none of the old tanks from the 1948 war. And I thought to myself, okay, they were rusting and they were whatever. A reminder of how the state was established and how we fought for it. There was a reminder almost every day, and that is gone. And Israelis have so much, and they've advanced, and it's a healthy, vibrant society. I was there when they had some of the protests. It was a 4th of July parade for both groups. They walked with their flags and their friends and their children. I didn't see so many dogs, but I could see the road to the Knesset. But it was a happy time. And then another group came later in the evening with the same thing. But I think those reminders of where we were and how far we've come are somewhat erased, especially maybe for more secular Jews, the struggle that went on. And I know you have a Holocaust museums and reminders, but just those battles, and
Yeah.
some of them are not
That's interesting.
I forgot to say one thing. At Mount Herzl Cemetery, you see, when you see all this personalization, the soldiers are buried in the order that they pass, that they're killed. And so there's always an empty grave in the last. So it's this chilling idea that we haven't, the sacrifice isn't over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like to say something here. You said something about going to the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unified everything. I think at the top there is so many Jewish real size instruction. I think if we get all spiritual in our core, we can do everything too. But I would like to hear more about unifying with.
Well, when you think about it, just on the most simple level, true unity is when you understand that when you love someone, you have to love their children. Like if you really love someone, you love their children because they love their children. You love what they love. So the concept of loving God means loving his children. So banim l'Hashem Elokecha. We are children to the Lord our God. We are his children, not like literally children. So to love God is to love his creations. To love God is to love his children. To love God is to look beyond the facade of differences and see the divine essence at the core of the person. It's so irrelevant what they believe. It's so tragic to associate a person with their what's the word, that echo chamber, because everyone's existing within their own echo chamber. To love God is to love his children. To deny God is to deny love of his creations. So love of God and love of his children are the same thing. And so you can't really get to total unity non-spiritually. And that is part of the problem. I would say that it demands a spiritual perspective, but it doesn't have to be a religious perspective, meaning a secular person doesn't have to be religious to say, I recognize that there's divinity in you and we're connected, and I'm going to transcend the differences and see you for your humanity. So it's ultimately unity is deeply spiritual, and there isn't love of God without unity. You can't love someone and not love their children. It's the same thing. They're synonymous. They're the same thing. I don't know. I mean, it's not, there's no difference between love of God and love of his children. And they're indicators of each other. To love you is to love what you love. Yeah.
Ellie, we love you.
Just staring at me. Or else to stare you. Take something else inspirational.
Let me know when you're coming. I have a little, we call it the casita. It's a little side house. It's not a house. It's a room with a bathroom and a little mini fridge. So we have a coffee thing. You put your milk in. You don't even have to see me. You can come, and it's separate from the house, and come for Shabbat and come to Israel. I mean, I know this is a little bit of a preaching to the choir crowd, but I don't think this crowd needs that much. But you have friends on the outside that don't think like that you don't think like you, and I don't need to tell you. So there's being here for Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Hazikaron, not in that order, it's really meaningful for me to be with us.
Aside from the obvious, I would miss your family.
Target.
What is
I really miss Target. I dream about Target. I also miss boxes. Goki, I love. I hate the shopping. Sorry. Okay, what do I miss in America? Are we being serious? I love boxes. You find good stuff in
What food
boxes.
can't you have?
Boxed broth, like that imagined broth. Oh, the food in Israel.
No, I know, but what?
I mean, when you keep kosher in America, it sucks.
Right, what do
In Israel, you have wonderful food never ends. Oh my gosh, I have Indian food one night, I go out, I have Vietnamese food one night, like,
No, but I mean, like, you know, there's always a certain product that you.
yeah, boxed soup broth. Like Imagine soup broth, they don't sell boxed broth.
I don't know, you
Don't.
can't find, still order, my son cannot find.
That's not true. That's absolutely not true.
Please tell
That's
me
not
where.
true. Everywhere, any market, that's not true.
No, you can afford.
That's not true.
What's the thing there
Yeah.
that you can't go away?
What do I have in my suitcase?
Yeah.
Your granddaughter?
Oh, I was gonna be way more materialistic. I went shopping.
I don't need spirits. What do you think is actually?
Oh. I miss and I don't miss Amazon.
There's no Amazon.
But it takes 2 or 3 weeks. But the good side of Amazon, or sometimes it comes earlier, but all jokes aside, not really, you sort of have Amazon, but not really. Not really having Amazon means all the stores are open and the streets are flooded with people going into stores. And the mom and pop, there's no Walmart, there's no Target, you know, good for better. There are possible equivalents, but the small stores are burst. They all stay in business, so you don't see rows of closed stores. The stores are all open and they have a lot of customers. That's really healthy. That's really, really healthy. Like you don't even have Starbucks, so like there's room for like Israeli big coffee shops and smaller coffee shops.
Like a Starbucks.
Well, they have Aroma, they have a few that are as big as Starbucks, but still, you can exist as a small boutique coffee shop. But you know, you feel like it hasn't been homogenized and sort of commercialized. It's commercial, but it's just nice to see that small stores can exist and people are shopping in them. I meet people in our Ulpan and our Hebrew class, and I meet people in our neighborhood. And I'm an introvert who never wants to meet people.
But people are, in those kinds of situations, friendly and want to meet people.
So friendly. All the Olim are super friendly. Israelis are also really friendly, but you're intimidated with the language a little bit, and they're different. The Israeli mentality is the Israeli psyche. Here's the word I learned. It's actually Yiddish, but they use it in modern Hebrew. Never, who speaks Yiddish here? Do you speak Yiddish? Don't be a friar. You know what a friar is?
Yeah.
It's a sucker. Israelis never want to be a friar. Like you're always like, what are you charging me? You think I'm a friar? Like you think I'm a friar? Maybe it comes from thousands of years of being taken advantage of. But an Israeli will never be a friar. So if the air conditioning guy comes in and he says, that'll be 320 shekels. The answer is, do you think I'm a friar? You know, you would never say sucker.
Actually, that's a 100% Polish word
Friar?
from Polish, yeah.
Not Yiddish? It's not Yiddish? Friar?
Everything that's incorporated, but it's more from the church. Yeah.
It's not involved.
Well, I heard it in Polish all the time. You're not gonna be a friar, but it's great to hear it in Hebrew. That's awesome.
Come back. Dance your way to Friar. I don't know if it's Yiddish.
There's been 3 places. Still.
Bye, everyone. How was the weekend?
Come back.
So my